Eleanor Vance, a woman whose hands had sculpted clay into breathtaking forms and wielded brushes to capture the ephemeral beauty of light, found her truest sanctuary within the walls of her historic Victorian home. At 72, her movements were slower. Her silver hair a halo around a face etched with the wisdom of decades, but her spirit remained vibrant, her eyes still holding the keen, discerning gaze of an artist. This house, nestled on a sprawling, tree-lined property just outside Santa Fe, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was her studio, her gallery, her memory keeper. Every sun-drenched room held a piece of her life. The scent of linseed oil in the north-facing studio, the shelves overflowing with art books in the library, the garden bursting with the vibrant colors she so often translated onto canvas. Her late husband, Arthur, a quiet historian and a man of profound integrity, had understood her deep-seated need for this creative haven. Together, they had meticulously built a life rich in intellectual curiosity, artistic pursuit, and a shared appreciation for the simple, profound beauty of the world. Their home was not merely a dwelling, it was a living testament to their shared passions, a repository of laughter, quiet contemplation, and countless creative endeavors. Her days now followed a gentle, almost meditative rhythm, morning coffee on the veranda, watching the desert light paint the distant mountains, hours spent sketching in her meticulously cultivated garden, capturing the fleeting patterns of shadow and bloom, and long, immersive afternoons lost in the meditative process of painting or sculpting, where time ceased to exist. These creative periods were punctuated by cherished visits from a few long-standing friends, fellow artists, retired academics, and neighbors who valued her wisdom and wit. She lived a life of quiet independence, valuing her solitude, her creative freedom, and the ability to dictate her own days above all else. Her modest pension, diligently managed, was supplemented by occasional sales of her earlier, highly sought-after works, which fetched respectable prices from discerning collectors. This income was more than enough for her needs, as she had always believed in living simply, investing in experiences and knowledge rather than material excess or ostentatious displays of wealth. Her needs were few, her contentment deep. This peaceful, self-sufficient existence, however, had begun to feel subtly threatened, like a delicate painting slowly accumulating dust. The source of this growing unease was the increasingly frequent and unannounced visits from her only son, Mark, and his impeccably dressed wife, Chloe. Mark, a successful but perpetually stressed investment banker based in Denver, and Chloe, a socialite with an insatiable appetite for luxury and a penchant for designer labels, were outwardly charming. They would arrive in a whirlwind of polite inquiries about her health and well-being, bearing expensive, often impractical gifts, cashmere scarves Eleanor never wore, high-tech gadgets she didn't understand, gourmet chocolates she rarely ate. Yet, beneath the veneer of filial concern and superficial affection, Eleanor sensed a subtle, insidious shift, a growing undercurrent of judgment and thinly veiled condescension. "Mother, this house is simply enormous," Chloe would often remark, her perfectly manicured hand sweeping across a grand, sunlit room, her tone implying both awe and thinly disguised disapproval. "How do you manage it all by yourself?" "The upkeep must be a nightmare, darling." Mark would chime in, his voice laced with a paternalistic concern that grated on Eleanor's nerves, making her feel like a child. "She's right, Mom. It's a lot for one person. We worry about you, really." Eleanor would offer a polite, practiced smile, a deflection honed over years of dealing with their subtle intrusions. "It's my sanctuary, dear. And I have wonderful help with the garden and cleaning, so you needn't worry." But their eyes would linger on the slightest imperfection. A tiny chip in the antique plaster, the peeling paint on a window frame, the slightly overgrown rose bushes in her beloved garden. As if meticulously cataloging her perceived inadequacies, building a silent case against her independence. The suggestions began subtly, almost imperceptibly, then grew bolder, more insistent. "Perhaps a smaller place, Mother? A lovely condo with less maintenance. You could travel more, see the world." Chloe would enthuse, her voice a syrupy blend of false concern and thinly veiled eagerness, Showing her brochures for sterile, modern apartments Eleanor found utterly soulless and devoid of character. Mark would follow up with financial plans, meticulously prepared spreadsheets detailing the burden of property taxes, rising utility costs, and ongoing maintenance. He would always conclude his presentations with the sensible and prudent option of selling the house, emphasizing the freedom and liquidity she would gain. Eleanor would listen patiently, her gaze drifting to the canvases stacked in her studio, each one a silent, vibrant rebuttal to their materialistic worldview. This house was her legacy, her life's work, the very air she breathed, imbued with the spirit of Arthur and her own creative journey. The thought of leaving it, of abandoning this living history, was akin to losing a limb, a part of her very soul. As their visits became more frequent and their intentions less disguised, Eleanor started noticing small, unsettling discrepancies that pricked at her subconscious. A favorite antique teacup, a delicate porcelain piece, a cherished gift from Arthur, was missing from its usual spot on the mantelpiece. A small framed sketch she'd done of Arthur, a tender, intimate portrait usually on her bedside table, was gone. She initially dismissed them as her own forgetfulness, a natural, if annoying, part of aging. "Oh, Eleanor, you're just misplacing things," she'd tell herself. Even as a tiny, persistent seed of unease began to sprout in the fertile ground of her mind. Mark and Chloe seemed to appear more frequently, sometimes unannounced, always with a convenient excuse. "Just checking in on you, Mom," or "we were in the area, thought we'd drop by." Their eyes, however, seemed to scan the rooms with a predatory intensity, lingering on her more valuable pieces of art, not with appreciation for their beauty or artistic merit, but with a cold, calculating glint that Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. She felt a creeping sense of vulnerability, a subtle, insidious erosion of her cherished independence. Her sanctuary, she realized with a growing dread, was under siege, not by an external force, but by the very people who were supposed to protect her. The quiet hum of her artistic life, once so harmonious, was slowly being drowned out by the insistent, unsettling whispers of their unspoken, sinister agenda. The peace she had cultivated for so long was slowly, irrevocably, being shattered. The subtle suggestions from Mark and Chloe quickly escalated into overt, relentless pressure, turning Eleanor's beloved home into a battleground of wills, a silent war waged with brochures and veiled threats. Brochures for luxury senior living communities with their sterile, impersonal common areas, and downsized, maintenance-free condos with their cramped, uninspiring spaces, began appearing on her coffee table, left conspicuously by Chloe during her increasingly frequent, unannounced visits. Each glossy page depicted a life Eleanor found utterly antithetical to her own. A life devoid of the rich textures of creativity, the quiet joy of her garden, and the profound echoes of a shared past. Mark would follow up with persistent phone calls, his tone a carefully modulated blend of feigned concern and barely suppressed exasperation. "Mom, we've done the numbers. This house is a financial drain. The property taxes alone are exorbitant, and the maintenance costs are just spiraling out of control. The market is hot right now. You could get a fortune for it. Think of the freedom, the liquidity you'd have." He spoke of her life in terms of assets and liabilities, completely devoid of the emotional and spiritual value her home held, reducing her existence to a mere balance sheet. Eleanor would counter with her deep, unshakable attachment to her north-facing studio, her vibrant garden, the countless memories woven into every creaking floorboard and sun-drenched windowpane. "This isn't just a house, Mark. It's where your father and I built our lives. Where we dreamed. Where we created. It's where I am." But her heartfelt words seemed to fall on deaf ears, immediately replaced by Chloe's saccharine pronouncements about modern convenience, social opportunities, and peace of mind, as if a sterile apartment could ever replace a lifetime of accumulated joy and creative expression. Eleanor found herself increasingly isolated, a slow, deliberate strangulation of her social life. Mark and Chloe subtly, yet effectively, discouraged her old friends from visiting, portraying her as frail, forgetful, or simply too busy for company. "Oh, Mother's having a quiet day, dear," Chloe would tell Eleanor's bridge partners over the phone, her voice dripping with false sympathy, or, "She's a bit overwhelmed with visitors lately. You know, at her age." Soon, the weekly bridge games, a cherished ritual, dwindled to nothing. The afternoon teas with longtime confidants became rare, then ceased altogether. Eleanor, a woman who had always prided herself on her sharp mind, her vibrant intellect, and her extensive social circle, felt a creeping loneliness, a profound sense of being slowly cut off from the world she knew, from the people who truly understood her. She began to doubt herself, her own perceptions, wondering if she truly was becoming a burden, if her memory was indeed failing her, if her once vibrant colors were truly fading. It was during this period of growing unease and self-doubt that Eleanor started noticing more significant, unsettling discrepancies with her precious art collection. A small, exquisite bronze sculpture by a renowned contemporary artist, a cherished gift from Arthur on their 30th anniversary, seemed to have a slightly different patina, a subtle alteration in its texture. A vibrant landscape painting, one of her own early works, a piece she knew intimately, looked subtly off, the distinctive brushstrokes not quite matching her unique, recognizable style. She would stare at them for long minutes, a frown creasing her brow, dismissing it as her aging eyes, or perhaps the changing light, or even a trick of her own mind. But the feeling persisted, a nagging, persistent suspicion that something was amiss, a discordant note in the symphony of her home. She had a meticulously maintained, handwritten inventory of her entire collection, a habit Arthur had encouraged for both insurance and sentimental reasons. She decided, repeatedly, to cross-reference it with the pieces in her home, to confirm her nagging doubts. But somehow, she never quite found the uninterrupted time, always distracted by another urgent phone call from Mark about her financial future, another important document requiring her signature. Then, into this increasingly suffocating atmosphere, came Leo. Leo Rodriguez, a bright, earnest, and quietly observant art history student from the local university, had been assigned to help Eleanor digitize her extensive archive of sketches, photographs, and exhibition catalogs. A project she had long dreamed of, but lacked the technical expertise to undertake. He was quiet, respectful, with a keen eye for detail and a genuine, almost reverent appreciation for art. As they worked together in Eleanor's sun-drenched studio, painstakingly cataloging each piece, Leo, with his youthful tech-savvy and intuitive understanding of digital systems, also helped her navigate her bewildering online banking and investment accounts, a task she found increasingly daunting and opaque. It was Leo who, with his fresh, unbiased perspective, first noticed the oddities that Eleanor had dismissed. "Mrs. Vance," he said one afternoon, his brow furrowed with concern as he looked at a digital statement on her computer screen. "There's a series of rather large withdrawals here, marked as property maintenance, but they don't seem to correspond with any of the invoices for the work actually done on the house. In fact, they're significantly higher." Eleanor peered at the screen, her heart giving a little lurch, a cold sensation spreading through her chest. She had indeed authorized some garden work and minor roof repairs, but these amounts were far larger than she remembered, disproportionate to the work completed. She brushed it off, a practiced reflex. "Oh, I'm sure it's just some accounting error, dear. Mark handles all that for me. He's so good with numbers." But Leo's innocent observation, combined with the lingering suspicion about her art, planted a seed of doubt that Eleanor, despite her attempts, couldn't ignore. She began to pay closer, more critical attention, not just to the subtle shifts in her art collection, but to the vague explanations from Mark about market fluctuations or rebalancing portfolios that accompanied increasingly large, unexplained transfers. She asked him for detailed breakdowns, for specific invoices, but he would always provide generalized summaries, promising to send the full reports later, which, predictably, never arrived. The feeling of isolation deepened, her world shrinking. She felt like she was trapped in a beautiful, gilded cage, her once vibrant creative spirit slowly fading like the colors on an old, neglected canvas. The pressure to sell her home became relentless, a constant, insidious drumbeat in the background of her life, threatening to drown out her very essence. She knew, deep down, with a growing sense of dread, that something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong, but she couldn't quite grasp the full, horrifying picture. The invisible walls around her were closing in, tightening their grip, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she needed to find a way to see beyond them, to expose the truth, before it was too late, before her life, her legacy, and her very identity were completely erased. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow, a stunning, brutal impact that shattered the last vestiges of her trust and left her utterly breathless. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind of day Eleanor usually cherished for its clear, brilliant light, perfect for illuminating the subtle nuances of her palette. She was in her north-facing studio, preparing to work on a new landscape, her mind already composing the vibrant interplay of light and shadow on the distant mountains. Her gaze, however, fell upon a small, unassuming still life hanging on the wall, directly opposite her easel. It was a painting of a single, perfectly ripe pear, rendered with a delicate luminosity, a piece she had created in her early 20s, a tender, heartfelt gift to Arthur on their very first anniversary. It wasn't her most valuable work in monetary terms, but it was deeply sentimental, a tangible, irreplaceable link to the innocent, hopeful beginning of their life together. As she looked at it now, a cold dread washed over her, chilling her to the bone. The brushstrokes were subtly off, the texture not quite right. The subtle, almost ethereal glow of the pear, somehow muted, flat. It was a fake, a crude, almost imperceptible imitation, designed to deceive, but unmistakable to the artist who had poured her soul into the original. Her beloved, irreplaceable original was gone. Eleanor's hands began to tremble violently, and a wave of profound nausea swept over her, making the studio spin. This wasn't her aging memory playing tricks, nor was it a mere trick of the changing light. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was theft. Her mind, usually so precise, raced, piecing together the unsettling discrepancies she had dismissed. She rushed to her meticulously organized art inventory, her handwritten ledger, a habit Arthur had instilled in her for both insurance and historical purposes. Flipping frantically through the brittle, yellowed pages, she found the entry for Pear Still Life, 1975. Next to it, in her own hand, was a small, almost imperceptible smudge, as if something had been erased and rewritten, a date perhaps, or a note of provenance. A chilling realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. The meticulous inventory, her safeguard against chaos, had been tampered with. The very record of her life's work had been corrupted. Overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing weight of betrayal, Eleanor called Leo, her voice trembling so violently she could barely speak. He arrived within the hour, his youthful face creased with concern as Eleanor, tears streaming silently down her face, pointed a shaking finger at the fake painting. "It's gone, Leo. My pear. My original. They took it." Leo, with his sharp eye and burgeoning expertise in art authentication, immediately saw the discrepancies that Eleanor, in her distress, had only vaguely perceived. "You're right, Mrs. Vance. The impasto isn't yours. The color saturation is off. This is a very poor copy." Together, they began a frantic, systematic search through her entire collection, a horrifying scavenger hunt through her own betrayal. They compared each piece to her inventory, cross-referencing with the high-resolution digital photographs Leo had taken during their cataloging project. The discoveries were horrifying, each one a fresh wound. 2 more small, early paintings, deeply personal works, were fakes. Crude imitations now occupying the spaces where her originals had once hung. A rare signed print by a renowned contemporary artist, a piece Arthur had gifted her for her 60th birthday, was missing entirely, its empty space on the wall now glaringly obvious, a gaping hole in her meticulously curated life. "This isn't just a few missing items, Mrs. Vance," Leo said, his voice grim, his eyes fixed on the digital banking statement scrolling across his laptop screen. "The property maintenance withdrawals I showed you before? They correspond almost perfectly with the dates these pieces would have been sold. or when loans against your property were initiated. And look here. He pointed to a series of large recurring transfers, meticulously hidden amidst legitimate transactions. These aren't just for your living expenses. These are going into an offshore account and then being funneled into a shell corporation registered under Chloe's maiden name, Margaret Dubois. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her skin cold and clammy. A shell corporation? What for? What are they doing? It looks like they've been taking out loans against your property, Mrs. Vance, Leo explained, his voice hushed, filled with a quiet outrage. Huge sums of money, and using this shell corporation to funnel the money, making it look like legitimate business expenses or investments. They've been systematically liquidating your assets, selling your art, mortgaging your home, all while telling you it's for your own good, to downsize and simplify your life for your peace of mind. The scale of Mark and Chloe's deception was staggering, a monstrous tapestry woven from intricate lies, calculated manipulation, and breathtaking greed. They hadn't just been subtly pushing her out of her home. They had been systematically dismantling her entire life, piece by piece, brick by brick, to fund their lavish, unsustainable lifestyle. The financial plans and retirement options were nothing more than a smokescreen, an elaborate charade designed to push her into a sterile, impersonal retirement home, where she would be easier to control, her independence completely stripped away, and they would gain full, unfettered access to her valuable property and remaining assets. The missing teacup, the misplaced sketch. They weren't signs of her failing memory, but early, chilling indicators of their insidious long-term plot. A cold, hard fury, unlike anything Eleanor had ever felt, replaced her initial devastation. Her son, her own flesh and blood, the boy she had raised with love and sacrifice, and his avaricious wife, had betrayed her in the most profound, unforgivable way imaginable. They had not only stolen her art and her money, but had attempted to steal her autonomy, her dignity, her very identity as an independent, creative woman. The pain was immense, a searing, gaping wound in her heart, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce, unyielding resolve. She wouldn't let them win. She wouldn't let them erase her. This wasn't just about money or art. It was about reclaiming her life, her legacy, her fundamental right to self-determination. The canvas of her life, once vibrant and full of authentic color, had been defaced by their deceit, smeared with their lies. But Eleanor knew, with a newfound certainty, that she still had the power to paint a new, truer masterpiece, one that would shine brighter than ever before. Chapter 4. Strokes of Justice. The initial shock of the revelation slowly gave way to a chilling, steely clarity. Eleanor spent the rest of that day and much of the night meticulously reviewing every document Leo had uncovered, every bank statement, every suspicious transaction. Her hands, usually steady and graceful when holding a delicate brush or shaping clay, trembled uncontrollably as she traced the intricate lines of deceit, the cold, hard numbers revealing a story of profound betrayal. The pain was still raw, a constant dull ache in her chest, a phantom limb of trust severed, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it fueled a growing, fierce determination. She had to act, not just for herself, to reclaim what was hers, but to prevent Mark and Chloe from harming anyone else, from continuing their predatory game. Her first step was crucial, a foundation upon which her entire counteroffensive would be built. She needed a lawyer she could trust implicitly, someone as sharp as a sculptor's chisel and as unyielding as granite. She thought of Arthur's old friend, Martin Davies, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had handled their family's legal affairs for decades, a man known for his integrity and quiet tenacity. Martin was officially retired now, presumably enjoying his golden years fishing in the tranquil rivers of Montana, far from the legal battles of the city. But Eleanor knew, instinctively, that he would never turn her away. She called him first thing the next morning, her voice calm and steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her, a testament to her newfound resolve. "Martin, it's Eleanor. I need your help." It's about Mark and Chloe. And it's urgent. She briefly outlined the horrifying situation, the stolen art, the drained finances, the insidious attempts to force her from her home, the looming threat to her very independence. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the faint crackle of the connection. "Eleanor, my dear," Martin finally said, his voice grave, a deep concern replacing his usual cheerful tone. "I'll be on the first flight out. Don't touch anything. Don't say a word to them. Just gather every piece of evidence you have. I'm coming." Within 24 hours, Martin Davies, looking a little grayer and perhaps a touch more weary, but no less formidable, was sitting in Eleanor's sun-drenched living room. The elegant antique coffee table, usually adorned with art books, was now buried under stacks of damning documents, financial statements, property deeds, copies of auction house records, and photographs of Eleanor's art collection, meticulously cross-referenced. Leo, looking exhausted but resolute, sat quietly beside them, ready to explain the complex digital trails he had uncovered, his laptop open, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Martin listened intently, his expression hardening with each new piece of evidence, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing. When Eleanor finished her harrowing account, he leaned back, a deep frown etched on his face, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. "This is worse than I imagined, Eleanor. This isn't just financial mismanagement or a few questionable sales. This is outright fraud, potentially grand theft, and the attempt to force you into a retirement home to gain control of your property. That's elder abuse. A very serious charge." Eleanor felt a fresh wave of nausea, a cold knot in her stomach. Elder abuse. The words hung in the air, cold and clinical, yet they perfectly described the insidious, dehumanizing way her son and daughter-in-law had been operating, stripping her of her autonomy and dignity. "What can we do, Martin?" she asked, her voice tight with suppressed emotion but firm. "We expose them," Martin said, his eyes glinting with a familiar legal fire, a spark of justice. "But we do it strategically. We want to reclaim your assets, secure your home, and ensure they face consequences for their actions. But we also need to consider the impact on your family, especially if there are other children involved, innocent parties who might be caught in the crossfire." Eleanor shook her head, clarifying. "Jennifer and Michael are Mark's children from a previous marriage. They are not involved in this. Mark and Chloe have no other children." This simplified things slightly, narrowing the scope of the battle. Over the next few days, Eleanor, Martin, and Leo worked tirelessly, a small, determined team against a formidable deception. Martin began by sending a formal legal notice to Mark and Chloe, a chilling document demanding a full accounting of all financial transactions related to Eleanor's assets and a complete cessation of all attempts to sell her property or art. He also quietly initiated a freeze on any accounts tied to the shell corporation Leo had discovered, effectively cutting off their illicit financial pipeline. Meanwhile, Leo continued to build a comprehensive digital dossier, cross-referencing sales records with auction house data, meticulously tracing the movement of funds, and documenting every single instance of deception and manipulation. Eleanor, for her part, began the painful, emotionally draining process of identifying which of her precious artworks had been replaced with crude fakes, and which had simply vanished into the ether, sold for their own gain. It was like a scavenger hunt through her own betrayal, each discovery a fresh wound, yet each also a step towards clarity. During this intense period, Eleanor also began to quietly secure her remaining legitimate assets, transferring funds to new, independently managed accounts, and updating her will to reflect her newly clarified intentions, ensuring her true wishes would be honored. She wasn't just reacting to their attacks, she was actively reclaiming her power, brick by brick, document by document. She thought about her future, a future she would now define entirely on her own terms, free from their manipulative grasp. She had always dreamed of establishing a foundation to support young artists, a way to give back to the community that had nurtured her own creative spirit. Now, with the truth exposed and her resources potentially reclaimed, that dream felt tangible, a beacon of hope in the darkness, guiding her forward. The process was emotionally draining, a constant battle against despair and anger. Mark and Chloe, initially dismissive of Martin's formal legal letter, soon realized the true gravity of the situation as banks began freezing accounts and auction houses were contacted, their illicit activities brought to a screeching halt. Their calls to Eleanor became increasingly frantic, then accusatory, their voices laced with panic and thinly veiled threats. "Mom, what is this? Are you trying to ruin us?" Mark would demand, his voice trembling with fear. "You're being manipulated by that old lawyer. He's just after your money." Chloe would shriek, her usual composure completely gone, revealing the raw, desperate woman beneath the polished facade. Eleanor, however, remained calm, following Martin's firm advice. "Refer them to me. Do not engage. Do not explain. Do not justify." Each call she ended, each accusation she deflected, was a small victory, a reclaiming of her peace, a reaffirmation of her boundaries. She realized that the quiet strength she was now exhibiting was far more powerful than any outburst of anger or emotional plea. She was no longer the frail, easily manipulated old lady they perceived her to be. She was Eleanor Vance, the artist, the protector of her legacy, and the architect of her own justice. The stage was set for the final confrontation, an exhibition of truth that would expose their deceit for all to see, a masterpiece of reckoning. The formal family meeting was arranged at Martin's insistence, a calculated move designed to expose Mark and Chloe's deceit in a controlled, unassailable environment. Ostensibly, the meeting was to clarify financial misunderstandings and discuss Eleanor's future living arrangements, a pretense that Mark and Chloe, now visibly rattled by the legal maneuvers and frozen accounts, desperately clung to. Their faces were tight with barely concealed anger, their usual composure frayed at the edges. The venue was Martin's elegant, old-money law office, a space of quiet power and gravitas, a neutral territory that subtly underscored the gravity of the situation and the legal weight behind Eleanor's claims. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Martin, a pillar of calm strength, and Leo, the young man's presence a quiet testament to his unwavering loyalty and crucial role in uncovering the intricate web of deceit. Mark and Chloe entered minutes later, their usual polished demeanor replaced by a brittle tension that crackled in the air. Mark's expensive suit looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it, and Chloe's designer dress seemed to hang a little less perfectly, her usual radiant smile replaced by a thin, nervous line that barely concealed her fear. The meeting began with Martin, his voice calm, measured, and methodical, outlining the precise purpose of their gathering. "We are here today to address serious discrepancies regarding Mrs. Vance's financial assets and property, as well as the unauthorized sale of several valuable artworks from her collection." Mark immediately bristled, his face flushing with indignation. "This is ridiculous, Martin. We've been trying to help Mom manage her affairs. She's getting older, she's forgetful, she needs guidance." Chloe nodded vigorously, her eyes darting to Eleanor with a feigned look of concern, a performance perfected over years of manipulation. "We just want what's best for her peace of mind, for her security." Eleanor, however, remained perfectly composed, a picture of quiet dignity. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, meeting their eyes directly without flinching, a silent challenge. "My peace of mind, Mark, Chloe, has been anything but peaceful for the past few years. And my memory, while perhaps not as sharp as it once was, is certainly good enough to remember my own paintings." She paused, letting her words hang in the tense air, allowing their full weight to sink in, or rather the absence of my own paintings. Martin then took over, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, clinical delivery of damning facts. He laid out the evidence, piece by painstaking piece. He detailed the unauthorized withdrawals, the suspicious offshore accounts, the fraudulent loans taken against Eleanor's property, and the confirmed sales of her irreplaceable artwork through obscure online auctioneers and private dealers. Leo, with a quiet, almost surgical efficiency, projected digital copies of the forged documents, the altered inventory records, and the damning bank statements onto a large screen, illuminating the intricate web of their deception for all to see. The sheer volume and meticulous detail of the evidence were overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Mark's face, initially flushed with anger and indignation, slowly drained of all color as the undeniable, horrifying truth unfolded before him. He stared at the documents, his jaw slack, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, reduced to ashes. This isn't possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible, a broken sound. "Mom, what is this?" "It's the truth, Mark," Eleanor said, her voice clear and firm, resonating with a quiet power. "The truth you and Chloe have gone to great lengths to hide, to bury under layers of lies and manipulation." Chloe, however, reacted with a different kind of fury, a desperate, cornered animal lashing out. "This is slander. This is a witch hunt. You're trying to ruin us, Loretta," she shrieked. Her perfect composure completely shattered, revealing the raw, desperate, and ugly woman beneath the polished facade. "You're just jealous of our life, of our success. You're an old woman who doesn't understand the modern world." "What success, Chloe?" Eleanor asked, her voice cutting through the hysteria like a sharp blade. "The success you built on my stolen legacy? The success you financed by selling my art and mortgaging my home behind my back while pretending to care for me?" The room descended into chaos, a maelstrom of accusations and denials. Mark, caught between his mother's calm, irrefutable accusations and his wife's frantic, desperate denials, looked utterly lost, his face a mask of confusion and profound, sickening betrayal. He turned to Chloe, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "Is this true, Chloe? Did you really do all this? Did you lie to me?" Chloe, cornered and exposed, lashed out, her words a torrent of self-justification. "It was for us, Mark. For our future. Your mother was just sitting on all that money, letting it rot. She didn't need it. We did." "I needed my home," Eleanor stated, her voice quiet but powerful, cutting through Chloe's desperate pleas. "I needed my art. I needed my autonomy. And I needed my son to be honest with me, to respect me." She then revealed the final, crushing blow. The legal documents she had prepared with Martin, outlining her intent to pursue full legal action for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. The consequences were severe: forced repayment of all stolen funds, potential criminal charges, and the complete disinheritance of Mark and Chloe from any future claims on Eleanor's estate. The weight of these legal ramifications hung heavy in the air, a silent, damning judgment. Mark collapsed back into his chair, defeated, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Chloe, however, continued to rage, her accusations growing wilder, more unhinged, until Martin, with a quiet but firm tone, informed her that any further outbursts would result in her immediate removal from the premises and additional legal penalties. The exhibition of truth was complete. The canvas of their deceit had been unmasked, stripped bare, revealing the ugly, greedy reality beneath the polished facade. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, broken only by Chloe's ragged breathing and Mark's muffled sobs. Eleanor looked at her son, a profound sadness in her heart, a deep ache for the boy he once was. The man she had raised, the man she had loved, had been twisted by greed, manipulated by a woman who saw only opportunity where Eleanor saw family. But in that moment, as she faced the wreckage of their relationship, Eleanor felt a strange, unexpected sense of liberation. The truth, however painful, however devastating, had finally set her free. The aftermath of the unmasking dinner was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional reckoning, and the painstaking process of rebuilding. Mark, utterly shattered by the dual revelations of his wife's extensive deception and his mother's unwavering resolve, initially retreated into a shell of denial and profound self-pity. He isolated himself, grappling with the monumental betrayal and the collapse of his carefully constructed life. Chloe, on the other hand, reacted with a desperate, aggressive fury, attempting to fight every legal charge, every demand for restitution, clinging to the last vestiges of her control. But Martin, with Eleanor's full backing and Leo's meticulously compiled, irrefutable evidence, was relentless. Faced with overwhelming proof of fraud, elder abuse, and theft, Chloe eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid jail time, agreeing to a significant repayment plan and a permanent restraining order from Eleanor. She vanished from their lives as quickly as she had appeared, leaving behind a trail of wreckage. Mark, deeply shamed by his complicity, and facing the complete collapse of his own marriage and career, slowly began the arduous process of coming to terms with the truth. He sought intensive therapy, confronting his own weaknesses and the destructive patterns that had allowed him to be manipulated. Tentatively, he began to rebuild a fragile bridge with his mother. One hesitant phone call, one awkward visit at a time, a long and uncertain path towards reconciliation. Eleanor, meanwhile, was not just recovering, she was actively, vibrantly reclaiming her life. The stolen artworks, or their monetary equivalents, were meticulously recovered, piece by piece, returned to their rightful place in her home. The fraudulent loans taken against her home were nullified, the financial burden lifted. Her sanctuary was once again truly hers, purged of the insidious taint of deceit, breathing freely again. But Eleanor knew that simply restoring her past wasn't enough. She wanted to build a future, a legacy that reflected her true values, a testament to her resilience and generosity. Her first major step, a dream she had quietly nurtured for years, was to establish the Eleanor Vance Foundation for Emerging Artists. Using a significant portion of her recovered assets, she created a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing grants, state-of-the-art studio space, and invaluable mentorship to young, struggling artists, particularly those from underserved communities who lacked access to traditional resources. Her historic home, once a target for exploitation, became the foundation's vibrant headquarters, its spacious rooms now buzzing with creative energy, filled with the hopeful chatter of aspiring artists. The north-facing studio, where she had painted for decades, was opened to resident artists, its perfect light now nurturing new talent, a continuous cycle of creation. Her relationship with Leo deepened into a profound chosen family bond, a connection forged in the crucible of adversity. Leo, now the Foundation's dedicated and indispensable director, worked tirelessly by her side, his passion for art, his sharp intellect, and his unwavering loyalty proving invaluable. He was, in many ways, the son she wished she had. A true kindred spirit who understood her vision, shared her values, and supported her dreams unconditionally. They spent countless hours planning programs, reviewing grant applications, visiting art schools, and attending exhibitions, their shared purpose bringing Eleanor a deep, abiding joy she hadn't felt in years, a sense of profound fulfillment. Eleanor also began to joyfully reconnect with her old friends, explaining the painful truth of her recent isolation. They rallied around her, their loyalty unwavering, happy to have the real Eleanor back, their bridge games and afternoon teas resuming with renewed vigor. She resumed her painting classes, not as a student, but as a revered mentor, sharing her wisdom, her techniques, and her life experience with eager young artists who hung on her every word. She even started traveling again, not on a cruise with a deceptive daughter-in-law, but on enriching art tours to Europe, sketching in sun-drenched piazzas in Italy, exploring ancient galleries in France, and finding new inspiration in every corner of the world. On one such trip to Florence, amidst the masterpieces of the Uffizi Gallery, she met Arthur, a kind-eyed widower from Boston, a retired architect with a dry wit and a shared, profound love for Renaissance art. Their connection was gentle, unexpected, a quiet blossoming of companionship that brought warmth and laughter to her evenings. He called her every Sunday now, their conversations a comforting ritual, a new thread woven into the tapestry of her life. Her relationship with Mark remained complex, a work in progress. He visited occasionally, his apologies halting, sincere, and filled with genuine remorse. He was a shadow of his former self, humbled by the devastating consequences of his actions and the profound loss he had experienced. Eleanor, in her wisdom, offered forgiveness, not as a way to forget or condone, but as a path to her own peace and healing. She knew their relationship would never be what it once was, the innocence irrevocably lost, but there was a fragile hope for a new, more honest connection, built on the painful lessons learned and the shared understanding of human fallibility. One crisp spring afternoon, a year after the unmasking dinner, Eleanor stood in the main gallery of her home, now transformed into a vibrant exhibition space for the Foundation's inaugural show. Her own recent work, a series of powerful abstract pieces reflecting her journey of betrayal, resilience, and reclamation, hung prominently. Their bold colors and dynamic forms a testament to her enduring spirit. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and the vibrant energy of young artists and enthusiastic art lovers. Leo stood beside her, beaming with pride, his eyes reflecting her own joy. "What do you think, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, gesturing to the bustling, lively room. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes, reflecting the warm light from the skylights above. She looked at Leo, her chosen son, her partner in this extraordinary new chapter. She thought of Arthur, her late husband, whose foresight, love, and integrity had ultimately protected her legacy. She thought of the young artists whose dreams she was now helping to nurture, their futures brimming with possibility. This was her masterpiece, she realized, not just the art on the walls, but the life she had reclaimed, the family she had rebuilt, the future she was actively shaping. It wasn't conventional, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was honest. And it was, in its own way, truly beautiful, a vibrant testament to the power of truth and the enduring spirit of an artist. The quiet rebellion had blossomed into a magnificent renaissance, a new dawn,